watched the Joe Rogan interview. So Joe Rogan and Donald Trump, how did it go? I thought it was one of the few things that might be able to change the trajectory of the election because given 3 hours of Donald Trump, God knows what he could do. He might have caused himself tremendous damage in this interview. And I think that he's leading at this point. So if he caused himself damage in the Rogan interview, this could have been potentially an election changer. So did that happen? That's what I'm going to explain to you guys. I'm going to break down the summary as quickly as I can, things that were true, things that were untrue. Did it help Trump stylistically, strategically, politically? Was it correct in terms of policy and in terms of facts? I'll break all of that down for you. And on Monday at 6 o'clock Eastern, we do it every weekday at 6 o'clock Eastern. First of all, we're going to have an amazing show. Geraldo Rivera might be on. Scott Adams is definitely on at 8 o'clock. That's the creator of Dilbert, very conservative, obviously. But we're going to have tape from the interview and show you piece by piece some of these things so you can see it for yourself and we could break it down more thoroughly. But this is a quick summary so you get a sense of what happened, okay? So, number one, as usual, we're honest here on the Young Turks and we don't shade things towards our side. I thought Trump looked presidential and personable. I hate that, but he did. And so the presidential thing is, I mean, as long as you're not listening to him, right? He had a great suit on. He's sitting there and speaking authoritatively. Rogan is having a back and forth conversation with him that's seems like two human beings talking. That's definitely helpful to Trump because politicians are normally so awkward, right? But he's speaking to him as a person of authority, and Rogan is deferring to him, and then they like each other, so it goes back and forth smoothly. There aren't talking points. Standard politicians, including Kamala Harris, are talking point machines, and that's not what Trump is doing. I'm going to get to the substance. Don't worry of what he said, and that's where things devolve. But if you're a person looking at it from the outside and you don't know you don't know much about politics and you don't know much about the details of these issues, you look and you go, "Oh, well, that guy looks like a president. And that guy looks like he's a real human being having a conversation with another human being. He doesn't seem like a robot. He doesn't seem fake in that sense." So. And most people don't know a lot about politics, and undecided people know even less usually because that's why they're taking so long to decide. Now, I know all the facts, so I decided a long time ago, right? So, hence, on the outside, before we get to the actual substance of it, it looks really good for Trump. And you got to be honest about it. If it was, and you know me, if it was a train wreck, I would be very happy to tell you that it was a train wreck and explain exactly how it was, right? Now, let's get to the substance. So, look, Rogan keeps saying throughout his career, look, I don't really know politics. And so I talk about it, but I don't really know it. And he used that as kind of an excuse for when he gets things wrong. But it's also true. And you can't block the guy from talking about politics because he doesn't know all the facts and all the details. On the other hand, it is so frustrating when you've got a 3-hour interview with a presidential candidate and a guy who lies 24/7 and pathologically says the most outrageous things. And I'll get to some of that in a sec. That a guy just can't check him because he doesn't know, right? I don't think it's out of malice at all. And I think that, look, as I've said before, I think Rogan's affected by his audience. A poll came out saying that his audience is plus 35 in favor of Trump. So there's a little bit of audience capture there. There's guest capture there because most of his guests are right-wing, et cetera. He's not doing it with bad intent. He just here, I'll give you an example. Near the end, he said, Trump said something about Glenn Youngkin, the governor of Virginia. And Rogan's like, yeah, I don't know him. Never heard of him. If you know politics, you definitely know Glenn Youngkin because people thought he should have run against Trump. Some of the donors tried to pressure him to run against Trump, but he didn't. Glenn Youngkin had a lot of the parental controversies. Oh, the Democrats aren't giving enough leverage to the parents and some of the culture war issues, etc. So I don't blame him for that, and I don't want to disqualify him from political conversations, but when Donald Trump says outrageous things, he's just not equipped to be able to know on the spot the actual facts to correct them. And B, in this interview, if I'm being honest, and that's all I ever do, he wasn't inclined to correct him. He was inclined to help him. Okay. Was it a softball? Of course. Now, I know that Rogan, in his mind, probably thinks that he was trying not to make it a softball. He went back and tried to press him on the election, I think at least 3 times. He tried to press him on a couple of topics. And given that he's not a tough political interviewer, maybe that's the best he could do. But on those topics, I mean, he's just a cream puff, total cream puff. He didn't. Not only did he do softball, he would sometimes preemptively answer the question for Trump. And we'll show you the clips Monday, 6 o'clock Eastern, right here, Young Turks on YouTube. Um, and and one time Trump admits an act of corruption, and Rogan doesn't even call him out on it. So I'll give you examples on all these as quickly as I can. Kyle Burns, uh, thank you for using Super Chat. And look, Trump didn't have to do it because he was leading. The fact that he did do this interview, partly to your question, Kyle, shows that he had a little bit of courage. He's still playing offense, and I wish we had that kind of attitude. So, if you watch this overall, you would, and you didn't know anything about politics, you'd walk away thinking that Kamala Harris is a bigger liar than Donald Trump. That's outrageous, totally outrageous. I'll give you one spectacular example to say. But does Kamala Harris lie from time to time? Yeah, sure. Does she make mistakes from time to time? Yes, definitely, right? And we call out the normal corporate establishment politician lies all the time. But it's not close between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Donald Trump's a pathological, ridiculous liar. So here's one example from the interview. He's talking about, hey, did you win the election? And Trump won't answer the question. He's like, it was very unfair to me. Said very unfair. And the media was unfair. Look, the media was unfair to me when I ran for Congress. They smeared me in the most insane ways, called me anti-Muslim when my background's Muslim. They smeared me so bad they had to issue corrections. They pretended that I was in favor of W2 when I called them a racist, an anti-Semite, a bigot, etc. They were so embarrassed by their lies about me that they had to correct those lies. Do I then say election was fraudulent? It was rigged. I actually won the election. No, I didn't win the election. I didn't get anywhere near enough votes to win that election. And the media being jerks to you is not election interference. It's not voter fraud. It's just the media being jerks to you. That's the battlefield. That's the obstacle course you got to run through. The media buried Bernie Sanders in 2016 and 2020. And so saying that, no problem. You've got to tell people the truth. But it doesn't mean that Bernie Sanders actually won those primaries. He didn't. He got less votes. So Rogan couldn't ask him the question that I'm dying for someone. Did you get more votes than Joe Biden? Don't tell me about, I didn't like the media and Bob was unfair to me and I cried about it. Hillary Clinton does the same thing. I'm not asking you if you thought everything was perfectly fair. I'm asking, did you get more votes? And he didn't ask him that. But Trump believes that he did. I mean, Rogan says, hey, do you have evidence that you printed? He's, yeah, there's a lot of books about it. And I put it out there. He's like, where did you put it? He didn't put it anywhere. It doesn't exist. The books that are written about it are moronic. The movie 2000 Mules that Dinesh D'Souza did about it, the publisher itself, the distributor of the movie, pulled it and said, sorry, it's full of lies. We're so sorry. Because they were getting sued like crazy because half the movies is a lie. The whole premise of the movie is a lie. So, look, you could tell that Rogan doesn't believe that Trump won the election, but he surrounded it with so many pillows. So the outrageous lie that Trump told, one of many, but this one struck me, was he said, the Hunter Biden laptop story. That was the most important thing in the world. And that was election interference. That's not election. That's people. Were they wrong to censor that story? Look, I think it's debatable, but if you say they were, I don't care. Okay. So Bush and Kerry, there was a story about how Bush had bin Laden in Tora Bora cornered, and Rumsfeld ordered the American generals to stand down and not pursue bin Laden. The New York Times held that story and helped George Bush win the 2004 election. And that was much more egregious. Oh my God, if John Kerry had the story that Bush had bin Laden and let him go, that definitely would have affected the election. But Kerry didn't sit there and go, I won, I'm going to cry, I won election interference media. No, that's the obstacle course you got to run through to win. The media is always unfair. So he says about the Hunter Biden laptop story, it moved the polls by 17 points. Come on, guys. Come on. If you don't know politics, I get it. Like, you don't know that one story can't move it by 17 points. But if you know politics this much, just a smidge, 17 points, what kind of a lunatic would say that? So Hillary Clinton probably lost. Well, she lost the election for 1,000 reasons, in my opinion, all her fault in 2016. But at the end of the election, right before, James Comey came out and said, "Oh my God, we're going to reopen the Hillary Clinton email investigation because we got Anthony Weiner's laptop." There you go, affecting the election interference. And it turns out that story was BS. It had nothing to do with Hillary Clinton's emails, and it cost her the election. She's allowed to cry about that day in, day out, but but she's not allowed to say, "I won and here's my fake electors." But did that story move the election against Hillary Clinton by 17 points? Of course not. Maybe it moved it by half a point, and maybe a half a point makes a difference. But even that would be gigantic. 17 points? That's just saying I'm a moron and I don't know anything about politics. So, of course, Rogan doesn't correct that either. It's so outrageous. Trump knows it's so outrageous that he's like, look, it's a big number. As some people say, it can't happen, but I believe it. 17 points. Now, you're a moron. So what's the real election challenge to him? Well, brother, you went into 61 cases and you lost them all. You never presented one single evidence. You never showed it publicly. You never showed it in court. You've never shown it anywhere because it doesn't exist. And then, but here's the parts that Rogan probably doesn't even know. So he had fake electors. He did not use his real electors. We asked Rudy Giuliani about this at the RNC. You could watch that interview on the Young Turks YouTube channel, right? So why didn't you use your real electors? I asked Rudy. He said because some of them wouldn't do it. Because it was illegal. Both guys have slates of electors. Trump chose not to use a slate of electors because they didn't want to break the law and try to steal the election. So that's why he brought in fake electors. But Rogan probably doesn't even know that. So instead, if you watch the interview, you think like, oh, poor Trump, he got robbed. Oh, he probably won the election. That's not even remotely true. He knew he was trying to steal it the entire time. And then after the election, he said, let's terminate the Constitution. Does Rogan know that? I mean, the right wing claims to be massive constitutions, but to be fair, a lot of them, almost none of them know that. I asked one of the right wingers that I debated on Thursday when I debated 7 of them in a row. And to be fair to the guy, he was a really nice guy. And he said, oh, yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah, that gives me pause. So, Joe, that's when you're supposed to ask that question. I mean, already at least 30 million people have watched that. And probably a lot more will watch it. I like that they did it, but you've got to have at least one fact to disprove this outrageous lie that he has, that he won the last election. He looks like a jackass every time he says it, but for a person who doesn't know the details, you've got to be able to call him out on it. All right. Then there was a lot of fluff in the interview, talk about how windmills are so dangerous, cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, and Trump goes on his usual rants like, oh, when we were landing in Iraq. By the way, that was a good story for Trump. And when we covered it, because we're always honest, we're like, he went to go visit the troops. I forget if it was Thanksgiving or Christmas. And they loved that he was there. It was a good moment for him. Like the McDonald's moment. Trump said the CEO of Google called up and said it was like the most positive story that anybody's ever gotten in politics. I'm sure that Trump is exaggerating and that he didn't say it like that, but it was a super positive story for him. That's exactly what we said on the Young Turks, because we don't BS people. And all the other Democrats are like, oh, he looked ridiculous. It was terrible for him. I'm like, it's not terrible for him. It was really positive for him. And it turns out that's exactly what happened. But as he's telling the Iraq landing story, how he's landing on Air Force One, and he talks for 5 minutes. The guy can filibuster better than anybody. The pilot, so attractive. I mean, straight out of Central Casting. He loves that line, straight out of Central Casting. He looked better than Tom Cruise. He was hotter than Tom Cruise. He was also taller than Tom Cruise. I'm like, are we now going to get into his genitals like Arnold Palmer? I mean, the Trump's apparently in love with the pilot. And he's going, it's dark. You couldn't believe how dark it was. I'm like, get to a real question. You're driving me crazy. Okay. But okay, that's Trump. That's fluff. I got it. And Rogan's got to let him do some of that. And then there were things that were true. Like Rogan started the interview with, The View, 9 years ago when you went on there was kissing your ass when they thought you weren't going to win and that that you weren't a threat, and they were. That is true. And same thing with Morning Joe. They didn't mention it, but I was like, oh, you should mention Joe Scarborough. Scarborough and Mika were like, oh, Trump, because all those people on TV, all they ever do is suck up to power and to the famous, etc. So back then, Trump's famous. They're like, oh, we love you, Trump. Morning Joe and The View. And then they realize, but to be fair to the Morning Joe and The View, although I'm not often, I'm always fair to them. It's just they do such obvious propaganda that you can't help but criticize like almost everything they do. But like, to be fair to them, you should also keep in mind at the time they didn't know Trump was going to try to terminate the Constitution, steal an election, think about shooting protesters in the leg with the military. And that's another thing. Again, Rogan paints him as like a defender of freedom of speech. Oh, the other side is so bad on freedom of speech. He asked whether we could use the U.S. military to shoot American protesters. You think that's for freedom? You think that's for freedom of speech? You think that's for the First Amendment? No, it's literally the very worst thing you could do about the First Amendment. And Rogan, of course, doesn't ask him a question. In fact, he makes him seem like he was a hero about that issue. That's not remotely true. He talks about left-wing cancel culture, never talks about right-wing cancel culture. Go ahead, protest Israel on a college campus. They'll ruin your life. They'll take away your diploma. They'll arrest you. So how about that cancel culture that Donald Trump said that he's definitely in favor of? He said they should all be arrested for protesting Israel. And he said they should even be deported. They're Americans. Where are you going to deport them to? Kansas? Nebraska? But nope, no question about that. Pretending again that it's only the left wing that does cancel culture. Look, I've been canceled by every wing there is. I know they all do it. So then you get into voter ID. And this is an excellent example of how frustrating it was. Because, guys, I'm not shouting you guys out enough, the super chats and the members. Hit the join button below. I'll try to give you a shout out as we go. It's this person whose name unfortunately is in a different language says the View is exactly what's wrong with the media today. I totally agree with that. Just both Fox News, MSNBC, and the View, just propaganda from both sides. Trash. They would never tell you the truth if it hurt their side. So I loathe it. So on voter ID, he's like, I don't know anyone who doesn't. Rogan says, I don't know anyone that doesn't think that voter fraud exists. Everybody acknowledges it exists. Here, me, I think it doesn't exist. So is it that not a single human being in American history has ever done voter fraud? Of course not, right? But how common is it? Is it really common, like Rogan is implying? No. Heritage Foundation, as right-wing as it gets, the guys who wrote Project 2025 did a giant study of it and found out it happens 0.0000006% of the time. Almost never. Almost never. But if you watch that interview, you'd think, oh my God, voter fraud is like the biggest thing in the world. Oh, thank God Trump is stopping it. It's absurd. He's like, Rogan's like voter ID. And this is not Trump making these points. This is Rogan helping him make these points. Daddy and a caddy, thank you. No, terminating the articles of the Constitution. He's like, oh, that's been done before. It's called an amendment. No, that's called an amendment. It's not called terminating the entire Constitution. That's ridiculous. I want to pass an amendment. That's not terminating the Constitution. That's adding to the Constitution. That's amending the Constitution. Trump said terminate all the articles, rules, and regulations of the Constitution because his feelings were, he said, because there's massive fraud, which of course there wasn't. And there's no provision to terminate the Constitution in the Constitution. If you think that your feelings were hurt or you lost an election, or even if there was massive fraud, there's still no provision in the Constitution to automatically destroy the entire document. And that is as un-American as it gets. Alex Libe, thank you, brother. Appreciate you as both as a member and as super chat. So on the voter IDs, he says he's helping him along here, and he says, oh, I don't know why you wouldn't want voter ID. No one has ever made the case that we shouldn't have voter ID. And the only reason in the world that you wouldn't want voter ID laws is if you want to cheat. That's the only reason. All right, Joe, here's a reason. Again, he probably doesn't know it, but then you should ask somebody. 25% of African Americans in this country live in big cities and are in enough socioeconomic condition that they don't have a car. right? So they bottom line is they're either poor or they live in the cities, and that doesn't apply just to African Americans. But in case of African Americans, as an example, it's 25% of them that doesn't have a driver's license. So if you go, well, oh, what's the big deal? We all have driver's licenses. So most people in the audience think, yeah, we all have driver's licenses. No, if you live in a big city, a lot of white people, black people, Latinos, Asians, they don't have licenses. If you're poor, you don't have a car, you don't have a driver's license. So a lot of people don't have voter ID because of an ID because of that. It doesn't mean that you don't verify that they're citizens. There are no cases. And then Rogan comes up with a conspiracy theory about how they're moving them into swing states and allowing them to vote. That's not remotely true. The one bill that was proposed like now nearly a decade ago, it gives them a pathway to citizenship over the course of 14 years. What good would it, and that didn't even pass. Right now, they have no pathway to citizenship. What good would it do to move them to swing states on the hope that you pass a bill you haven't been able to pass in a decade, and that 14 years later they become citizens and vote in this election? Please get your conspiracy theories straight. That doesn't make any sense at all. And there's plenty of good reasons to verify the person's a citizen and should be able to vote without using a driver's license. So, okay, if you don't know it, say you don't know it, but then pretending you know it misleads your audience. I'm not trying to cancel him. I'm not saying he shouldn't have done the interview, etc. I just wish he had somebody knowledgeable in there. I don't think he's doing it with malice, but these things are just flat out wrong. And it's so frustrating to watch as the audience gets misled time and time again. And then, so in terms of protecting Trump, he'd be like, now I want to ask you about the election. But remember, the media really kind of interfered, didn't they? Well, bro, that's not even a softball. You're just giving him the answer you want him to answer because you're worried he's a dum-dum and he's not going to give you the right answer. So you're kind of handing it to him. And then at one point, they start talking about, hey, are you going to release the JFK files, the alien files, etc.? And Trump obviously hasn't read the files. He's like, did you read them? And he's like, I read him enough to know. He didn't read a word of it. He's just making it up. Okay. But that's not the important part. Trump's about to step in it. And he goes, there's got to be alien life out there. Could be in Mars. And Rogan's like, no. I mean, obviously we already checked Mars and obviously there's no life. Of course there's no. Trump thinks there might be not like microbes in the water underneath Mars. Like that's a perfectly fine conversation. Trump looked like he was about to say that he thought there might be living creatures on the surface of Mars, which is nuts. But Rogan wouldn't let him. He just jumped in. He's like, of course there isn't life on Mars. Of course, right, Donald? God, come on, Joe. Come on. If he's going to say something stupid, let him say it. I get that you're not doing a normal grilling interview, but if people don't know that he's a knucklehead and you cut him off every time he's going to say something stupid like that, and you never challenge him on the terrible things he says, people walk away with totally the wrong impression. Last one here, or last couple here. So on the things he didn't challenge him on, tariffs at the levels that Trump is proposing cause massive inflation. Of course, Rogan didn't ask him about that. I'm not surprised by that. And then Trump throws out, maybe I'll get rid of income taxes. He's like, there's no reason not to. Of course there's a reason not to, because then we would have nowhere near enough revenue to finance the budget. So we wouldn't be able to finance Social Security, Medicare, defense. Income taxes is a giant, enormous part of the government's revenue. You can't just get rid of income taxes. That's a child wouldn't say that. I mean, even a person with almost no political knowledge knows that. He's like, I don't know. Maybe we get rid of income taxes. Oh, because he's rich and he doesn't want to pay any taxes. And let's be honest, Joe's rich and he doesn't want to pay any taxes. So they have this insane conversation about getting rid of income taxes. There's no substance to it at all. Joe tries to press him on the deficit because he did he added $8.4 trillion to the debt, which is gigantic, about twice as much as what Joe Biden added in the same period of time. So I'm glad that Joe's trying to ask him about that. Good. And he's trying, right, to ask about real questions and hold him accountable in his own limited way. And Trump says, oh, that was COVID. But it wasn't. Most of that was pre-COVID. COVID added to it, but the great majority of the 8.4 was before COVID. Why? Because your dumbass giant corporate tax cuts didn't work. And then they make it seem like corporate tax cuts were populist. No, no, Joe, come on. On that one, it's I don't care what excuses. You got to do better than that, man. Corporate tax cuts are the least populist thing you can do. No, it never trickled down to us. We did not get higher wages. We got higher inflation. They took home literally $2 trillion, and you guys are painting it like it's for the average man. No, it was for the obscenely rich. It was for the CEOs. That is not a populist idea. It's the exact opposite. So it gets super frustrating as you're watching two people who barely know anything about politics talk and make it seem like that. Whoa, yeah, that guy, oh man, he knows so much. And Kamala Harris is the liar, and maybe he should be president. No, it's absurd. And and so Trump tells a story about corruption in the old days of his own corruption. He goes, there was this congressman of 28 years. We'll show you the clip on Monday, 6 guys Eastern. Everybody check it out. Mob Jitsu. Thank you for the super chat. I don't really care, but they're asking about Beyonce. I don't care one way or another, negative, positive. She's not going to move a single vote. The Washington Post editorial, LA Times non-editorials, they're not going to move a single vote. I'm going to get to at the end whether this is going to affect the election. The Rogan interview. Edward Gregorian. Yeah, I know. Rogan being interested in the conspiracies drives me crazy. Thank you guys for all the guys using super chat. And again, if you join as a member, just hit the join button below and I'll try to give you a shout out too. So so he protects him on anything. Oh, one other thing that I meant to mention. They start talking about vaccines. And Trump, to his credit, goes, well, we need some vaccines like polio. Polio was terrible and we needed a vaccine for that. I'm like, look at Trump. I'm like, good. Okay, good. Score 1 for Trump. Rogan jumps in and goes, no, maybe the vaccine caused polio. I'm like, oh, Joe, what are you doing? Jesus Christ, man. Jesus Christ. And then they start talking about how RFK Jr. is going to run all of health for us. He's going to run all of healthcare for us. Okay. That is not the win you guys think it is. If RFK Jr., I'm just like fairest guy in America, man. If RFK Jr. was running our housing policy, I'd be pretty excited. He actually had a good housing policy. If he was running our get money out of politics policy, I'd be excited. Healthcare is the least thing that RFK Jr. should be running. So, okay, here. We're going to challenge the drug companies. You're going to challenge them on the one thing that they did right. The vaccine saved people's lives. Why don't you challenge them on the fact that we are not allowed to negotiate drug prices? That's against the free markets. It's against capitalism. It's obvious massive corruption. And guess what Trump did about it for 4 years? Nothing. Trump's constantly like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to make everything better. Well, what'd you do last time? Your first 3 years, all you did was giant corporate tax cuts. You didn't do anything else. So I'm super curious. We'll talk about this another time, how new MAGA is going to react. Because I think there's a difference between old MAGA and new MAGA. Old MAGA was like, if Trump adds $8 trillion to the deficit, then I'm so glad the deficit should have been larger. He's a genius for adding it. I hope the deficit blows up because Trump is God. That's old MAGA. I don't think that those guys, some of those guys definitely still exist. New MAGA is a little bit different. And I'm super curious if they're going to hold him accountable on anything. Because right now, it's a bad look for them. As I hold Kamala Harris accountable and Joe Biden accountable on 100 things, 200 things. Do you see the right-wingers in media holding Trump accountable? I don't see that at all. And he's got 1,000 lies that you could hold him accountable for and nothing. So, but on this one, Joe was worse. Polio might have caused, the vaccines might have caused polio. That's insanity, brother. Come on, read a book. Jesus. Brett Johnson says, oh, yeah, about the alternate electors in Hawaii. Guys, you're driving me crazy. There's a difference between alternate electors and fake electors who are signing fraudulent papers. They were arrested for fraud. Okay. Anyways. Wisconsin, there was a ballot box issue. Guys, if there's an actual issue, let's do a recount. Let's do a hand recount. Let's do paper ballots. I'm on board. Let's do 3. Oh, good news. We did in all of the swing states. Georgia had 3 recounts, including a hand recount. Nope. It's never good enough because they can't ever lose. They can't ever admit that they lost. So Hillary Clinton lost in 2016. There, I just admitted it. Wow, that was so hard. But with Trump, nope. Let's lie for the dear leader. All right. So look, now let me get to the bottom. On the corruption story, and then I'll get to the bottom line. So corruption story is he says, "Oh, there's this guy in New York, 28 years, congressman, and I asked him to help with a license." And and he says, "Oh, well, I got to look into it." He's like, "Oh, I don't like that. You're a stiff. I don't like it." He says, "Okay, it was a little controversial." In other words, he's asking him to do something illegal, right? Now, he didn't say illegal, to be fair. You'll see the clip on Monday, 6 o'clock Eastern. But that's what he implied, that he asked him to do something he shouldn't have. And then, because then Trump says, but he was a survivor, so he didn't do it. In other words, if he had done it, he might have gotten in a lot of legal trouble, but he was savvy enough not to break the law for me, so he was a survivor. He tells a story of like mobster like corruption. Rogan doesn't say anything about it. I would have been like, Donald, you just seem to be saying that you wanted a congressman to do you a special favor because you gave him a campaign contribution. And it sounds like the favor would have gotten him in a lot of trouble. What do you mean? Why would it have gotten him in trouble? What were you asking him to do? That's a very logical follow-up question, nowhere to be found. Okay, so bottom line, I just showed you all the different things that they did wrong, all the lies that Trump said, etc. So is it going to affect the election? No. So that leaves us in a perilous place because look, guys, how many people are going to watch this video? Send it to everyone you know so they can get the real truth about what happened on the Rogan interview. Um, and send them the clips we'll do on Monday. But the bottom line is nowhere near as many people are going to watch these clips telling you what the reality was as the 30, 40 million that are going to watch the interview itself, which makes sense. Okay, so and when they watch that, they're not going to get the sense that Trump's a pathological liar. They're not going to get the sense that he was unhinged because Joe protected him from all that. So they're going to get the sense of a guy who looked presidential and personable. And if anything, I probably will help him. So this was one of the few places where we could have made a difference in this election. And by we, I just mean like the election could have changed depending on what the candidates do. If Trump had a terrible performance, then could have cost them because it was so high profile. But he didn't have a terrible performance. Whether you like it or not, whether you think it was fair or not, whether you think Joe Rogan helped him or not, the bottom line is on the optics of it, he looked perfectly fine. Oh, and I'll give Trump one more piece of credit. You know how I said, look, he's dumb, he's crazy, and lately he looks like he might also be in mental decline, and that's a toxic stew. But he did not look like he was in mental decline in this interview. He went for a 3-hour conversation. I didn't see any giant hiccups. I just saw the normal crazy that he is, the normal ignorant that he is, but I didn't see anything on top of that. So he didn't look like he had an issue with mental decline. So he comes out, in my opinion, smelling like roses to anyone who watches that and does know politics intimately. So, oh well, there goes that. And then we'll talk about it Monday, 6 o'clock Eastern. But Israel and Iran, situation, that's something else that could have affected the election. But Israel did a bombing, and it has so far not led to a larger war. So the window is closing for Kamala Harris. We'll share the numbers with you on Monday. We'll give you the latest, and I might even give you a prediction. I said it. Let's see how that goes. Benjamin Moral saying, buckle up. I hear you on that, brother. I hear you on that. Shane Hinkle, thank you for joining. American hero. Everybody who joins is part of the Young Turks and allows us to do honest shows, gets all of our programming. And yes, we try to help a little bit in the world. So if you're a person who wants to make the world a little bit better, come join the TYT community. Gustav, thank you, Gustav. Thank you for the super chat, though I don't agree with your opinion. You say, okay, I'll end on Gustav, okay? Gustav says, if you vote for Trump, you're going to get no war. That's what I'm curious about new MAGA. And we'll talk about that in the upcoming week. Are you guys actually going to hold him accountable? Because in that interview, too, he was like, yeah, Israel, they should bomb more. He didn't say they should bomb more. What did he say about Israel? That Biden was holding them back. So he's for more war, not less war. So right now it's theoretical. But if he wins and he says to Israel, oh, yeah, go for it. And by the way, I think I figured out why Netanyahu wants Trump to win. We'll talk about that in the live shows next week as well. Every day, tell your family, friends, tell Randy Gazelles, 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern. And then when we do the debates like we are going on Monday with Scott Adams, we go past 8 o'clock Eastern. Check it out, Young Turks on YouTube every night during the weekdays. So we'll talk about all this that's coming up too. But if Trump accelerates the war instead of bringing it back down. I'm super curious what the Trump supporters are going to do. Are they going to say, well, of course he had to. Of course he had to help start a giant war in the Middle East, just like the neocons. Of course he had to finance the entire war. Of course, of course. War, we didn't mean no war. We meant, yeah, war. Let's see what happens. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Trump will make the wars magically disappear. I really, really doubt it. But given how the election is going, we might find out, because he's, in my opinion, definitely leading. All right. A lot more on Monday. Richard, thank you. And are we going to do election coverage? You kidding me, dog? All day. Start at noon on election day. Don't make sure you don't miss it. You're going to go somewhere else. The left-wing channels are going to tell you Kamala Harris is winning, whether she is or isn't, in the beginning at least. The right-wing channels are going to tell you Trump is winning, whether he is or isn't, for the entire time. Why don't you come here and find out what the reality is? Okay, love you guys. See you Monday at 6.